Before going into texturing clothes and other things we want to add to our character, it is important to first adjust our geometry, since the textures and clothes will then follow the form of the head and body. Maybe we want to transform the clean human form into an elf or some alien-looking creature. So working on the mesh would be the first step in our customization process. As pointed out in the previous chapter, we need a workflow that doesn't break any of the functionalities of the metahuman. There probably are a number of different ways to approach this. What I will show you here is a workflow that allows you to modify the mesh using Blender and an Unreal Engine plugin called Mesh Morpher. This plugin is unfortunately quite pricey, but in my opinion it is worth the money. You can find it on the Unreal Marketplace, just search for Mesh Morpher, and it is also available on ArtStation. You can find the link in the course description on Gumroad. They also have a ton of tutorials and how to use it, so if you have any questions beyond what I'm showing here, feel free to dig in and get familiar with its functionalities. Right, so after you install it to the engine, you need to activate it in the plugin settings of your Unreal Engine project. And after activating the plugin, you will have to restart the engine. Now you can access it via this icon on the top bar. Now let me quickly explain what this plugin actually does. The way it works is as follows. The plugin uses two OBJ files to create a morph target for the skeletal mesh. One is the original mesh, let's call it the morph base, and the second one is the morph target. This is what you create in Blender by using the sculpt or editing tools. So we need to take our metahuman base character in Unreal Engine, create an OBJ file for the head and the body, modify them in Blender to our liking, and then use Mesh Morpher to generate a new metahuman character with those modifications applied. There is one major caveat for morph targets though. You cannot perform any operation on the mesh that changes the vertex count or order. Let me explain. You know that any 3D geometry is made up of interconnected vertices or points in 3D space, right? Now, what you are typically never concerned with when you are creating your 3D objects is the vertex order. This all happens under the hood, and in most cases the vertex indices are of absolutely no relevance to you. But in this case it actually is. Let's look at the body mesh of our hero model, for example. If you go to the Preferences, you can activate the Developer Tools in the Interface tab. When you then go into Edit mode, there is an additional option in the Overlays drop-down menu called Indices. This will display the actual index or order number for any selected vertex on your mesh. So every single vertex has a unique number assigned to it. What Mesh Morpher does is it compares the original mesh, our morph base, and the changed mesh, our morph target, and looks whether a vertex has changed its location in 3D space. For this comparison, all vertex indices of the two meshes need to be the same. So where's the problem? There are a lot of operations in a typical modeling or sculpting workflow that actually affect and change the indices by merging, deleting or adding vertices. So you cannot use the merge by distance function to join body and head, for example. You cannot cut or subdivide the mesh, and you cannot apply multi-res or subdivision modifiers. All these operations will change either the vertex count or the vertex order. And since Mesh Morpher needs two meshes with an identical vertex count and order, the only thing we are allowed to do is move vertices around. Actually, it's much like the shape keys function in Blender. If you try to apply a subdivision modifier, for example, Blender will tell you that you can't do it to a mesh with shape keys. Although the blend shapes in Blender are a bit more forgiving, so if you do change the mesh in a destructive way, the blend shapes still kind of work. The Mesh Morpher plugin will not work well with this type of modifications. So if you see something like that, then that's the reason why. In sculpt mode you can use any sculpt tool you like, but you are not allowed to use Dyntopo or Remesh, since those modifications will absolutely change your vertex count and order. Alright, now with this out of the way, let's go and export our character. Open up the Mesh Morpher plugin and select your body mesh. We will then export this mesh as an OBJ watertight. I will call it hero_body_UE. Do the same with the face mesh. I'll call this one hero_head_UE. You probably ask yourself, why did I choose the watertight OBJ for export and not the regular OBJ? If you select the second option, called OBJ watertight, this will give you a welded mesh. A welded mesh means that all overlapping vertices will be joined. Let me quickly show you the difference between the two options. I have here two OBJs. The right one was exported using the first option, export as OBJ. The one on the left was exported using the OBJ watertight option. If I now go into edit mode and press L to select linked mesh parts, you see that this one consists of different separated parts. The watertight version, however, is one single linked mesh, which is better when we start sculpting on it. Now we will import those OBJ files in Blender. For the import options we need to set the transform to -X forward and Y up. This is just how the Mesh Morpher plugin is set up. By the way, you can save import and export options in Blender as a preset. So when you restart Blender, you can choose the preset and everything will be just set up correctly. Do the same for the head. Here we want to deselect split by object in the geometry section, otherwise you will get separated mesh parts for the eyes, teeth, etc. For sculpting we want it all to be one mesh. Let's keep things organized and rename those, so we know what meshes serve which purpose. And move them into a new collection by pressing M with both objects selected. Then let's duplicate the meshes and move them into another collection. This duplicate will be the mesh that we will modify and use as our morph target. We are now ready to actually begin working. Now at this point I would recommend that you pause watching the course and begin working on your character on your own. Since your model will probably look much different than mine, feel free to get your creative juices flowing and make something of your own. In the next video I will show you the modifications I did to my hero character using anatomy references and basic sculpting operations, but this is optional. Also, if you encounter problems around the head-body border, don't worry, that's normal and we will fix it later.